Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started like any other ordinary evening, the kind where everything feels calm and predictable. I had no idea that tonight would change my life forever. You know that uneasy feeling when something seems just a little off, like the air itself is holding its breath? That's exactly how it felt the moment I heard the soft knock on the door. I thought it was just my daughter coming back from her friend's house, but I couldn't shake the flutter of nerves in my chest. My heart was racing for a reason I couldn't fully understand yet. I want you to imagine this for a moment. A quiet house, the dim glow of the lamps casting shadows across the walls, and the sound of footsteps that should feel familiar. But tonight, everything felt different. I was alone with him, the man I thought I could trust, the one I never imagined could become the center of my worst nightmare. He was there, close, his presence undeniable, and in that moment, all the plans I had for the evening seemed meaningless. I couldn't even speak, frozen in a mix of fear and longing, caught in something I knew I shouldn't be part of, yet couldn't walk away from. Then came the sound that shattered the fragile bubble of secrecy, the door handle turning. My daughter. My little girl, the most important person in my life, about to walk in on something I had never intended for her to see. In that split second, my mind raced faster than it ever had. What would she think? How would she react? And most importantly, how could I possibly explain this moment, this betrayal, without losing everything I had worked so hard to protect? As I froze, staring at the door, 1,000 questions swirled through my mind. Have you ever been caught in a situation where one mistake could ruin everything? Where one choice, one moment of passion, suddenly threatens to unravel the life you thought was secure? I want you to think about that as we go through this story together. What would you do if your world suddenly tipped over in a way you could never imagine? This is not just a story about infidelity. It's about trust, secrets, and the fragile bonds that hold families together. Tonight, I learned that the line between desire and disaster is thinner than we like to believe. And as the door creaked open, time seemed to stop. What happened next changed everything. You'll have to stay with me to see how this moment unfolded, because the truth is, I had no idea how I would face what came after. The moment my daughter stepped into the hallway, everything seemed to slow down. I could feel my pulse echoing in my ears, every breath heavy with guilt and fear. But as I caught her smile and the easy way she greeted me, I remembered why I was fighting so hard to keep this part of my life hidden. She was my world, my reason for holding on to normalcy even when my heart seemed to betray me at every turn. Looking back, I realize now that the tension between him and me had been building for months. We had started with small gestures, an accidental brush of the hand, lingering looks across the room, subtle compliments that made my stomach twist in ways I didn't quite understand at first. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even something I wanted to admit to myself. But feelings, once they settle quietly in your heart, have a way of taking over before you even notice. And he had a charm I couldn't resist, a kind of warmth and understanding that made me forget, just for a while, about the responsibilities waiting for me outside that room. Every encounter with him had been like walking on the edge of a cliff. Exciting, terrifying, and impossible to predict. I would often catch myself thinking about him when I wasn't supposed to, replaying small conversations in my mind, wondering if he felt the same pull that I did. And now, standing there with my daughter just down the hall, that pull was more dangerous than ever. I couldn't let my curiosity, my desire, ruin the trust one had worked so hard to build in my family. As the evening wore on, the house settled into a quiet rhythm, the kind where even the smallest sound feels amplified. Every creak of the floorboards, every soft sigh, seemed to remind me that my secret was on the edge of exposure. I kept stealing glances at him, noticing the subtle ways he moved, the way he leaned in when he spoke, the way his eyes held a tension that matched my own. It was intoxicating, confusing, and utterly forbidden. I tried to focus on ordinary things: dinner, my daughter's homework, the routine sounds of a home that should feel safe. But my mind kept drifting back to him, to the moments that had already passed and the ones that were creeping closer. There was an undeniable chemistry, a magnetic pull that made it almost impossible to think clearly. It was as if we were both caught in a current, neither of us fully willing to resist, yet both terrified of the consequences if we surrendered completely. And through it all, a question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy. What happens when the life you've carefully built collides with a desire you can't control? Every glance, every brush of a hand, added another layer of suspense, another whisper of temptation that I couldn't ignore. I knew the risk, I knew the danger, yet part of me wanted to see how far this could go. As the night deepened, I found myself pacing the living room, wondering if my daughter had sensed anything unusual, if she had noticed the tension that hung between us like an invisible thread. And I realized that no matter what happened, there was no turning back completely. Every choice, every fleeting moment, was pulling me further into a story I wasn't sure I could control. The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Every time I saw him, my heart seemed to skip in a way I couldn't control, and every moment we spent apart felt heavier than the last. There was a strange push and pull between us. Part of me wanted to pull away completely, to protect my family and my dignity, and yet another part of me craved the attention, the warmth, the connection that had grown too strong to ignore. At the same time, life outside that tension continued as usual, or at least it tried to. My daughter, blissfully unaware of the undercurrents swirling around her, asked about her day, shared stories from school, and laughed in ways that made me ache with love and guilt at the same time. I found myself overcompensating, trying to be the perfect parent, trying to erase any hint of my distractions. But the truth was, nothing could fully erase the pull I felt toward him, and every encounter seemed to grow more dangerous, more charged with unspoken words and hidden glances. I began noticing small things about him that I hadn't before, the way he lingered slightly too long when I spoke, the subtle shifts in his expression when he thought I wasn't looking, even the faint scent of his cologne that seemed to follow me long after he left. Each detail was a reminder that what had started as a fleeting connection was deepening into something neither of us could fully control. It made me question my own judgment, my own ability to resist temptation, and yet I found myself drawn to him more than ever. And then there were the moments of quiet vulnerability, the ones no one else saw. He would speak of his own struggles, his past mistakes, and the loneliness that sometimes consumed him. It made me see him differently, not just as someone who was dangerous for my heart, but as a real person, with fears and regrets that mirrored my own. In those moments, the world outside the room seemed to disappear, leaving just the two of us suspended in something that felt inevitable and impossible all at once. But the tension wasn't one-sided. I could sense his own hesitation, the way he paused before leaning closer, the way his hand hovered in the air as if weighing every choice. It made the unspoken even more electrifying, the knowledge that every decision we made could tip the delicate balance between desire and disaster. And I wondered, if anyone else ever found out, if my daughter somehow sensed the undercurrent between us, what would it mean for the life I was desperately trying to protect? As I replayed these moments in my mind, I started noticing patterns in my own behavior, how I avoided certain rooms, how I found excuses to be elsewhere, how I couldn't stop thinking about the next time I would see him. And that's when I realized that this story wasn't just about desire. It was about the choices we make when we are pulled in opposite directions by our hearts and our responsibilities. The air in the house that evening felt different, heavier somehow, as if it knew something was about to happen. I couldn't shake the feeling that every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the distant hum of a car outside, was amplified, warning me that the delicate balance I had been trying to maintain was about to snap. My heart pounded in my chest, and with every passing second, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down harder. He was there again, closer than usual, and the subtle tension between us had reached a point where even silence felt electric. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, nothing else existed. I could feel his presence in a way that went beyond touch. It was in the way he lingered in my peripheral vision, the way his voice softened when he spoke, the way his gaze seemed to read my thoughts before I even spoke them aloud. Every glance carried the weight of desire and danger, and I knew that one misstep could shatter everything I had worked so hard to protect. I moved through the evening cautiously, pretending to focus on ordinary things, but every routine task felt like a trap. My daughter's laughter from the next room was a reminder of what was at stake, and yet, the pull toward him was impossible to ignore. I kept catching myself imagining what would happen if we crossed that line completely, and each thought sent shivers through me, both thrilling and terrifying. Then, in a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, the silence was broken by the softest sound, the door handle turning. My stomach dropped, and time slowed in the way it always does before something life-changing occurs. I froze, unsure whether to move or stay, and I could see him tense as well, both of us caught in the unspoken knowledge that the moment we had feared might finally arrive. Everything hinged on that single instant, the question of whether we could maintain control, whether my carefully constructed world would survive, or whether it would all collapse in an instant of recklessness. Every heartbeat seemed louder, every shadow more threatening, and I realized that nothing could prepare me for what might come next. And in that suspended moment, I want you to imagine yourself in my place. What would you do if the person you care about most was just outside the door, unknowingly walking into a situation that could change your life forever? Would you try to stop it, hide, or take the risk? Just as I thought the moment could not feel more intense, something happened that I hadn't anticipated, an unexpected sound from outside the room, faint but distinct, that made both of us freeze. It was the kind of noise that immediately sets your heart racing, a soft cough, almost hesitant, like someone had just realized they weren't supposed to be there. My mind instantly raced. Was it my daughter? Or someone else entirely? The tension in the room shifted instantly, and what had already been charged with suspense now felt like walking on the edge of a cliff. He glanced at me, his eyes wide with the same alarm I felt surging through my body. That moment, that shared glance, was loaded with unspoken questions. How had this happened? Who could be outside? And most importantly, could we keep our secret safe for even one more second? The air between us was thick with a mixture of fear and desire, and I realized just how precarious our situation had become. Every decision we made in the next few seconds could change everything. My mind flashed back to earlier in the evening, to the small choices I had made to keep my family life intact, to maintain appearances. Every polite smile, every casual conversation, had been a carefully placed piece in a puzzle that now seemed impossible to control. And yet, despite the growing panic, I couldn't deny the pull toward him. It was like a magnet, impossible to resist even when every instinct screamed at me to pull away. And then, the door handle moved again, but this time, slower, deliberate, almost teasing in the way it turned. My pulse quickened. Whoever was on the other side had no idea how much danger, how much tension, had been building behind that door. And suddenly, what had seemed like a single thread of suspense became a tangled web of possibility. If she or anyone walked in now, the consequences would be immediate, unavoidable, and life-changing. I found myself searching for a way to regain control, but my mind was clouded with conflicting emotions. Desire and fear, guilt and longing, all collided in a way that made it impossible to think clearly. He moved closer, a silent question in his eyes, and I realized that our connection was more dangerous than ever, more intoxicating than anything I had ever felt. Every second felt like a test of willpower, every small movement a potential trigger that could change everything in an instant. And then the realization hit me, there was more at stake than just my secret, more than the tension between us. This unexpected interruption introduced a new element into our story, one I hadn't prepared for, someone else's presence, unknowable intentions, and the risk that what we had tried to hide could unravel faster than I could ever imagine. It was a twist that neither of us had seen coming, and suddenly, the stakes were higher than ever. The door swung open, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stop. My heart raced, every nerve in my body alert, and I braced for the moment I had been dreading. But what I saw made me gasp in disbelief. My daughter wasn't alone. She stood there holding the hand of a friend from school, her eyes wide and curious, completely oblivious to the tension that had filled the room. Relief and panic collided inside me, and I realized just how close we had come to being exposed. He stepped back, his expression a mixture of alarm and something softer, something almost protective. In that instant, I understood that our connection, intense and impossible as it had felt, could no longer be allowed to endanger the people I loved. My heart ached, but I knew I had to make a choice, not just for myself, but for my daughter. I took a deep breath and gently guided him toward the other room, speaking softly, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. We moved apart, careful, deliberate, each step a reminder of the consequences we had been avoiding. The romantic tension, the pull between us, had reached its peak, but the moment demanded clarity. I realized that desire could never outweigh trust, family, and the life I was determined to protect. The connection we had shared was intense, unforgettable, but it had to end, for now at least. My daughter and her friend stayed unaware of the storm that had just passed, laughing and chatting as if the world outside that room didn't exist. I watched them, my heart heavy with longing and relief, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over me. Secrets had been narrowly contained, the danger diffused, but the experience had changed me forever. I understood now that passion and temptation, while intoxicating, could never justify risking everything I held dear. Just as I thought the tension had dissolved, a soft ping from my phone made me freeze. A message notification, simple and innocuous, but it was from him. I opened it with a mix of fear and curiosity, and what I read made my stomach twist. I'll wait. Whenever you're ready. The words were brief, but they carried a promise, a lingering thread of the connection that could still return. The resolution felt temporary, fragile, like the calm before another storm. The following days felt like a delicate balancing act. Life returned to its familiar rhythm, but I carried with me the lessons of the past weeks, the intensity of desire, the fragility of trust, and the undeniable pull of human connection. I made a conscious effort to focus on my daughter, to rebuild the routines and boundaries that had kept us safe, and to remind myself that some temptations, no matter how alluring, are better left unpursued. Though the tension between him and me had been diffused, the memory of those moments lingered. Every time I thought of him, a warmth surged through me, a reminder that the connection had not been meaningless. It had revealed vulnerabilities I hadn't recognized in myself. And yet, it also showed me the importance of making choices that honor not only my desires, but the people I love most. It was a quiet kind of wisdom, born from intense experience, and I held it close like a secret treasure. We continued our lives, careful and deliberate. My daughter thrived, her laughter and curiosity a constant source of grounding. He remained a presence in my life in smaller, more controlled ways, brief messages, polite conversations, the occasional smile that reminded me of what had been without threatening what mattered. In time, the sharp edge of guilt dulled, replaced by a more complex understanding of connection, responsibility, and the human heart. Looking back, I realized that the story wasn't only about temptation or infidelity. It was about choices, accountability, and the courage to navigate desire without losing ourselves. We are often tested in unexpected ways, and the measure of our character is found not just in the passions we experience, but in the restraint, wisdom, and compassion we show to those we love. That is the lesson I carry with me, and it has reshaped the way I approach every relationship and every decision I make. Life moves forward, quietly and steadily, even after moments that threaten to unravel it. And though I will never forget the intensity of those days, I can now face the future with a clearer sense of who I am and what matters most. The story is complete, but its echoes remain, a reminder that love, desire, and responsibility are often intertwined in ways we cannot predict. I want to hear from you. How did this ending make you feel? Would you like a sequel exploring what happens next, or do you think some stories are best left in the past? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my next stories. Summary related to the story. The shocking moment when my daughter opened the door a True Infidelity Story is a gripping tale of temptation, romance, and the complexities of human relationships. The story follows a woman caught between desire and responsibility, navigating secrets, passion, and the delicate balance of family trust. Through suspense, emotional intensity, and unexpected twists, the story explores love, loyalty, and the choices that define us.